Well, let me ask you a few questions about Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
You said there was something in there that you might want to read. It was released by UA in 1979, but it began shooting in March '76.
Yeah. Zoetrope Film. He put up his own money.
I know he financed pre-production.
Yeah, but he did more than that. He put up, I think, $7 million, right? That, for some reason, that number sticks in my mind. And remember, I was being 76. Yeah, they were going to make it, period. It was John Milius, who I knew very well from the early days, and they'd taken Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, and turned it into this. And of course, Coppola was a big star. How could you not want to make a movie with him?
Now, I understand there was a lot of rewriting by Francis on the location. Did Milius stay involved?
You know, I don't know. And that I only know because I've read it in the in Ellie's book. But I'm sure he did. He's a writer. The biggest problem, right? The biggest thing was wanting to put Marlon Brando in the movie. Now you said, when did we start? You know, it's possible it's still in here. The part I thought I forgot to read.
Oh.
I thought it was over with.
Oh, no, well, it began shooting in March of '76.
Okay.
So you
and the big problem was getting Brando. And when he showed up on the picture, he was, of course, 900 pounds. And Francis had to figure out how to shoot him. And that's why he shot in the dark. And, you know, I think Francis felt that Brando owed him, right? Brought back his career with The Godfather. And there was a lot of conflict. And then, of course, Martin Sheen had his heart attack. And the picture shut down. And it was terrible.
Well, even earlier there were some setbacks because he originally cast Harvey Keitel. Do you know why?
No, only because it was one of his people.
Yes, but then he fired him and they had to reshoot all those scenes with Martin Sheen.
But that whole thing, the only times it would be was he sent us a T-shirt that he had written on it, "Dear Arthur Krim, I promise I will have this picture ready for '77, Christmas of '77, right?" Because Arthur wrote him a letter when the picture went way over budget, and you know, he used to send for food from America to the Philippines, right? Big elaborate meals, right? Crazy. And Arthur wrote him and said, you know, we had a set amount what we would contribute, and he said, you're going to lose everything, and we, like you, don't want you to do that. That letter exists somewhere. And it was, I remember because Mike and I both read it, and it was one of those things where a studio executive is trying to protect his artist, but obviously it didn't help. The picture came out in '79.
That's right.
We went up to see it in, it has to be when I'm still there, in '77, when he came back from the Philippines the first time. Remember, the picture stopped and started again. He came back, and we went to his house in San Francisco on Pacific Street, one of those Victorian houses. And he had a fabulous screening room downstairs, and his wife was upstairs, and we were, me, Mike, Arthur Krim, Eric Pleskow, and a man who was our head of marketing and exhibitor guy, a very non-Hollywood type. And if possible, Gabe Sumner and someone else. And we all went to see the picture. There was an hour of picture, which had in it the scene with Aurore Clement, the French scene where they shot, which was a big part of it, right? When Sheehan comes there and they're all together and a romance, sort of something happens with them. And then And then Francis came home from wherever he was, and they
Mhm.
had wonderful hors d'oeuvres or whatever.
Mhm.
And because it was a lunchtime thing,
Mhm.
and or maybe 3 o'clock, and then everyone started to talk about how he was going back. He only had
Mhm. Mhm.
another few weeks
Mhm.
and finish the picture.
Mhm.
What he had left was the trip up the river,
Mhm.
big part, right?
Mhm.
And more of Marlin,
Mhm.
or was that in there? Anyway,
Mhm.
and he said he would like to release the picture at Christmas.
Mhm.
And we sat in that room listening to that conversation. Now,
Mhm.
does Mike talk about this at all?
Yes, I'm sure he does.
And we sat there, and then afterwards we all went out to eat, not Francis, and everyone at the table had this conversation about, well, you know, the exhibitor guy who was
Mhm.
darling man, who said, well, you know, we need the picture in October because we need to show it to the exhibitors, because he liked Thanksgiving. I think it's possible The Godfather was released at Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
He considered that a lucky time.
Mhm.
And I sat there and remember consciously, and I must have written it because it was so nuts. Everyone said, oh yeah, he'll be finished, and we'll have it for Christmas and then for the Oscars. I mean, you know, you have all those conversations.
Mhm.
And everyone believed him,
Mhm.
including Arthur Krim.
Mhm. Do you recall if anybody from Transamerica was there, if Jim Harvey or Jack Beckett?
No,
Because I know Francis evidently was friendly with John Harvey.
because, not John Harvey,
With,
not John. Wait a minute, it's a different first name, doesn't he? It's John Beckett, isn't it?
yeah, and Jim Harvey.
Jim Harvey.
Yeah. And was the production treated any differently because of this friendship?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, because he was in San Francisco, and they must have been thrilled
Mm-hmm.
to have this
Mm-hmm.
brilliant man making this movie. You know what Francis wanted to do when we screened? He didn't want to have credits on the picture.
Mm-hmm.
His idea, have you heard this?
Well, it actually came out that way at the first screening. They gave people program notes.
And he really wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, but you mean all over the country we're going to have someone hanging out a playbill? Because he said, well, they do it in the theater,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's
Mm-hmm.
where he kept saying, it's nuts.
What was his creative thinking about that? Why did he think it
It
was?
just came down to whatever was going on in his mind.
Mhm.
You know, he was I think he was, obviously, depressive, right?
Mhm.
And he was having whatever ideas, you know, he was,
Mhm.
when you went to, I remember being in his house, the feeling about food and, you know, just exuberant, like
Mhm.
Orson Welles, but
Mhm.
able to work.
Mhm.
With everything is more bigger, more lavish, wonderful, right?
Mhm.
You know, and trying everything new. Remember when he came down here and did the picture with the digital picture?
One from the heart?
One from the heart.
Mhm.
If you want to know anything about that, because we weren't involved, we didn't make that picture. He did it himself or
Mhm.
something. My friend Ann Gurso was
Mhm.
his editor.
Mhm.
And he was just one of these grandiose, is still a
Mhm.
grandiose man.
Mhm.
And you know, the thing that I think people don't recognize, really, or maybe people, that the power of the artist over the businessman. You want to believe him.
Mhm.
Not just for the money,
Mhm.
but just because you're enthralled and swept away. And I remember that, and I seemed to be the only one sitting at the table who knew the picture wasn't going to be done, but it was okay,
Mhm.
because we had all been swept away. And
Mhm.
I thought, and I remember saying something to Arthur. He said, well, maybe you won't have it done, but you loved being part of it. It's like meeting Leonardo da Vinci, maybe, or Michelangelo,
Mhm.
or Picasso, right?
And the footage was pretty impressive,
Oh,
obviously.
it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Questions about the script. Did you see any of these script changes during
I
production?
never read the script.
You never read the script?
I don't believe I did.
Oh.
Or I must have read it, but I don't remember. But if I
Uh-huh.
do, it might be in here.
Because I wanted to ask a specific question, which was if the Dennis Hopper photographer character was in the Milia script. Because he seems to be there just to give exposition about Colonel Kurtz. And I didn't know if that came from Francis's insecurity about getting the backstory on the screen.
You know, I haven't seen it since the beginning. And the thing I remember most, and I think everyone remembers, was the scene on the beach with the planes coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the original script. That part I do know,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the monkey place where Brando is with all those monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
I did read the script.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to try and see if I can find my notes.
At
But
what-
Dennis Hopper, I don't know, and I would think that but you know, in the Heart of Darkness is told as a narrative, as a first-person narrative,
Mhm.
and it must have been in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Michael Hare gets the credit for writing the narration. Who'd
I
written-
wasn't involved.
Okay, so because he did.
But what is Dennis in the picture? Where
He
is
plays
he?
the photographer, and he's the one who greets him when he arrives at the compound and gives him all the information about Kurtz.
You mean the compound of Kurtz?
Yeah.
Not in the beginning where
No.
where they're in a hotel room
No.
and before he
No.
goes
Mhm.
before he goes down the river.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so you don't know
No,
if
I don't know.
You don't know if Milius was offered the opportunity to write the narration.
You know, and I don't know what's happened to John Milius. Do you? The last picture he did was one about the Chinese invasion. There was something America gets invaded by China. Red alert.
Red Dawn?
Red alert. Some insane picture he did.
I understand that 4 different endings were shot, and Francis couldn't decide how the movie should end.
I'm sure that's true, but I don't remember.
You don't know what the different...
Which were.
Okay.
He too didn't know where he was going. It's like Terry Malick.
Mm-hmm. That was happening when Malick was shooting?
Malick and his shooting of Thin Red Line.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they, you know, those, I don't know. You start with what is a brilliant idea. You want to deal with that war, right? And the war had ended. We had made Coming Home, right? And here is this attempt to deal with the dark underside of life or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, and at the same time figuring out how to have an ending so people will come to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in reading this, we always wanted some kind of happy ending, right? So the people would come and see them. I mean, it's a different time.
Yeah.
Except, I gotta tell one story. I cannot bear not to tell this. This is about happy endings. Midnight Cowboy, made by UA people. I was not there, but it was the first Oscar party I went to here, and that picture won the Oscar, an X picture. And I was an agent, and Julian Blaustein was a producer who made a movie cartoon, one of these pictures at that time. And he's in my office, and he says, you know, Marcia, what I'm looking for, right, is I want to do Midnight Cowboy. I mean, a story of 2 buddies, you know, and they go through all this travail, and with that kind of happy ending. And I said, Julian, I don't think it's a happy ending. Oh, he says, oh, yeah. I said, as I remember, Dustin dead on the bus. He said, yeah, but they got to Florida. absolutely true. He then went up to teach at either at Stanford or Berkeley film. And I had from him his mother's brownie recipe, which is one of the great brownie recipes in the world. But he was truly of another generation. I mean, that was the end of that time. 55 Days at Peking, cartoon, that kind of picture, which we've tried to remake, I guess. Ridley Scott keeps trying to remake those pictures. But I don't think the audience is seeing them. You know, whether it's Troy or whatever.
Did Mike go to the Philippines ever during production?
No, almost positive.
Okay. The music is credited to Carmine Coppola and Francis. What contribution did Francis make to the music?
His father. How will I know?
Yeah. No, but I mean, he shared the credit. He put his name on the screen.
Yeah,
with
well,
his father.
He must have said, "Dad, here's what I would really like." Right? Have you ever been to go up to Napa and see the winery?
No, I've never been to his winery.
You have to go see it. It's fascinating because it has the history of the Coppola family. Right?
The film was budget went from 12 million to 30 million. What effect did this have on everything else that was in the pipeline?
Well, not our money.
Okay. So it really didn't affect the other movies you were doing.
It was his money. That's why Arthur wrote him that letter.
And
can you imagine 12 to 30? I
Yeah.
didn't know those numbers.
Yeah. Were you having any difficulties with your marketing and distribution people when the date kept changing?
Yeah, but I mean, it was, you know, what do? You wait. But it was 2 years after he promised the picture.
Yeah.
And the first screening, well, you must have been there. Was it the one at that theater on Sunset Boulevard? The one that's the Cinerama Theater?
Yeah, it's now the ArcLight, the Dome.
Yeah, that's where we all went. With a paper ballot, a paper playbill.
With the cast stickers.
You know, I'm going to try and look to see, but ask me, but a lot I don't. And of course, I had left.
You're in '79,
Yeah.
You weren't there. Was there a lot of gossip in town that the movie was unreleasable?
I'm sure. Standard.
Was there anything you could do to combat that? Did you recall ever having any meetings about it and talking about a strategy? Or
No. Because I think it is the nature of the town and the business, which is very much about people like bad news, like to spread bad news.
Francis took the movie to Cannes in May '79. You were at Orion then, but did you go? Were
No.
you there that year?
No.
When the film came out, both John Milius and George Lucas, who was initially involved in the material, said they did not like it. What was the general?
Well, George Lucas is Francis's dearest friend. And, you know, Francis, I think, has always been for George like a father figure, older brother figure. Because I saw the first parts of Star Wars, whatever year that is, New Year's Eve. I was with Saul, and we were in San Francisco, and we went to Lucas, even then had some kind of farm up there, and we saw 15 minutes of the picture. And I remember Francis being there, and George said, "What do you think? Do you think it's okay? Do you think it's okay?" So it must have been a very distressing moment, but yet they're as close now as they've ever been.
What do you recall was the reaction of Hollywood when the movie came out, Apocalypse Now?
I suspect bad reaction. Does the picture make any money?
I don't know if it made what it needed to make. What I've read, I mean, I found the Canby review. He called it an intellectual muddle, and most critics said that it only worked in places. And then the quote I read from Robert Towne was that it should have been called Apocalypse Now and Then.
so bad. Did you find a Pauline Kael review?
No. What did she, do you recall what she said?
No, because I've got all her books, but
Mhm.
she had the worst indexer.
Mm. Did you ever see Apocalypse Now Redux that came out in 2001? What do you think of the idea of revising and re-releasing movies?
I think it's a terrible idea.
Why?
Well, it's like an artist should be an artist one time, and he shouldn't have the right to change his mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Picasso paints a picture. Well, you can't even do it that way, right? I don't know what you can do it. You can do a novel. Dickens writes A Tale of Two Cities and says, you know, I've been thinking about it. I really don't like that last ending, right? But it would be a more cheerful movie if Sidney Carton doesn't die and yet they live happily ever after, or he wins or whatever. I don't think, it's not right. It's ridiculous. It is only because we have the technological ability to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, you know, the director's cut, because it always says that I wanted to make it this way. Every director's cut, what they write, but the studio people wouldn't let me. Right. I used to, when I taught a class and talked about writing and working for money and being an artist, I always tell a story that I read somewhere about El Greco and the famous picture in Toledo, Count Orgaz, right? It's the funeral of it's called the burial of something, and the picture was paid for by the citizens of Toledo, right? They wanted a big picture, and he had to put in the lawyer, the doctor, the businessman, and they're all painted in the picture, and they told him how big it was to be, right? And he did it. But because he is an artist, he was able to make a great work of art. But in truth, he did it for the job. And there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, that's a theory. But I do not like that. I hate those director's cuts because it's not true. They change their mind. The director changes his mind. And because they get so caught up in the making of the film that they then say, you know, Terry Malick, who I saw after the Thin Red Line came out, and he had a 185-page script, and I used to send him notes when I was at Phoenix, and said, oh, Marcia, I really appreciate this. We'll get together and we'll talk about it. He said, you know, I wasn't ready to make the picture. When I started shooting, I found the movie I wanted to make. It's a very expensive way to do it.